Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I am going to be ranking all of my Glamlite palettes. Now, I think I did this about 2 years ago and you guys loved that video. I have so much fun ranking my palettes. If you guys haven't seen it, I did recently post a ranking all of my Huda Beauty palettes, which was very fun. But this one I know is going to be super tough. Really excited about it. Glamlite is honestly one of those brands that is really underrated and I love everything about them. They're one of the most unique brands that stands out in my entire collection as far as eyeshadow palettes, and some people may think that it is kind of childish or that they're over the food themes, but me personally, I love it. It's like a breath of fresh air. It brings me back to my inner, foodie. I love everything about this brand. So let's go ahead and get into ranking my Glamlite palettes. I have 16 palettes to rank, so let's get into it. I'm so proud of myself because I literally went through my palettes. I literally wrote them with their numbers so I cannot mess up the numbers because I'm always scared I'm gonna mess up the numbers whenever I do these ranking videos, and your girl is prepared. Oh my god, my background is like bare. I literally have like nothing in this room, which I'm so excited about. As you guys are seeing this video, I'm currently moving. So this was pre-recorded because your girl had to get it in because I knew if I didn't, I would not post a video. I wouldn't have time to. So yeah, I'm pre-recording. So I don't know when this video is going up. Just know that it's going up. And I'm moving. I'm currently in the process of moving. So the 16th place palette goes to the taco palette, you guys. This is the Viva Taco palette. First of all, tacos are one of my favorite foods. I can never get tired of tacos. But the reason why I rank this in the 6th place is because whenever I look at this palette, I get primary colors. And though they're really important colors to have, I just am not drawn to this color story. It doesn't excite me. I feel like there's a lot of blues, greens, and reds. It almost is giving me like Christmas vibes. I do love that the colors in here make sense because they're all named after toppings. So like Mexican cheese, we have, polo, carne asada, salsa verde. Like the colors match the taco topping, so I'm not mad at that. But out of all the Glamlite palettes, this one is definitely my least favorite. But also this formula is not the Glamlite formula we all know and love today. The pizza palette. This is the palette that got Glamlite started. This is the palette that made them take off. This palette went viral. Like it went crazy viral. First of all, this is like one of the hardest palettes to store in my entire collection. I'm always having to make adjustment for this palette. I did keep the pizza box that it came in, which I love. The packaging from Glamlite is like unmatched. It's so good. So I kept the box because it is a square, so it's easier to store it in here. But when I tell you this takes up a crap ton of space. This palette is not my favorite. I don't usually pull from this palette. I forget that I have it in my collection. The only reason why I keep it in my collection is because I do collect Glamlite palettes. I mean, I guess it's safe to say I do collect them. And this is just the OG palette that started it off, and I'm happy that I have it. It's just the formula in here, like the shimmers are not good at all. Like this is like very lackluster shimmers. Like Glamlite, you guys are gonna see the progression of like the shades from Glamlite, but this one is, the formula is not my favorite at all. So number 14 goes to the burger palette. Now this palette is so fun because it's literally like a burger. It has like that really cool packaging on this palette, but I do like this palette a lot more than the taco and the pizza palette. Shade Blue Cheese is one of my favorites. I feel like the formula started to get a little bit better from Glamlite. As you guys can see, this little swatch from the last one I just did, you guys can see the progression already with this palette, and that's why I like this one a lot more. Okay, so let's get into the number 13 palette, which is the Pie palette. This one came out in 2020, I believe, and was this an exclusive in a box? I can't remember, but the Pie palette is number 13. It's ranked like lower in favorites just because of the formula is more of the Glamlite formula we love today. But I'm not the biggest fan of the color story of this. I don't usually gravitate to this palette. This is more so a like fall palette, which I do love. Like I love that it's a fall palette, but I don't remember to pull this palette in my collection. Like that's the only thing with this. I just don't remember to use it. It's not a very memorable palette out of all the Glamlite ones for me personally. Number 12 goes to the chocolate donut palette, to be exact. Now this palette right here is a very pretty neutral palette. If I had did this video maybe last year, this would be ranked higher up in my rankings, but there are other neutral palettes from Glamlite that I just love so much more than this one. But I feel like if you love smaller palettes and you want to try out a neutral palette from Glamlite, this is a great one to have. I love the color story of this. I love the shimmers in this palette. It's really, really cute. But this is in the number 12 spot for me. So number 11 goes to the paint palette. Now, believe it or not, you would think that this palette is so easy to hold, but it's actually really awkward to hold. I love the design of this. I feel like this is just really creative, and literally it's like a paint palette. Like, I love it. I love everything about the design of this palette, even though it is awkward to hold. But it is a typical rainbow palette. I have so many of these in my collection, so it's not really like jumping out to me because it is like a typical rainbow palette, but this palette does come in handy when I want to do a rainbow look. I'm always thinking about pulling this palette, which I do love. But as far as like up there in my favorites from Glamlite, this is not. So number 10 goes to the regular donut palette. This was the first one they came out with. The reason why this one used to be ranked a lot higher, but this palette just feels like it already exists from Glamlite with other palettes that I'm going to talk about. I feel like I can get this entire palette out of 2 of the other Glamlite palettes in my collection. So out of those palettes, this one is ranked lower because I feel like this palette is in another Glamlite palette, which we are going to get to in just a second. So number 9 goes to the Paint 2.0 palette. I think this is like the Paint Pro palette. Is that what this one is called? Yes, the Paint Palette Pro, which is a smaller version of the regular paint palette, but I like this one so much more because it is a rainbow palette, but I love these tones of the rainbow. It gives me more like pastel, mid-toned of those OG colors. Like the regular paint palette was giving me like primary colors. These right here are giving me different tones of purple, different tones of blue, green, orange, pink. I love this palette. This one is my favorite out of the paint palettes, but this palette is basically the mini donut palette, to be honest. Which one I prefer is definitely this one. Number 8. Okay, so this one is a palette that people don't usually talk about from Glamlite, but your girl has been talking about it a lot recently, and that is the Red Velvet Cupcake palette. I was sure that Glamlite was going to come out with more cupcake themed palettes. I kind of want to see that because I feel like this is like the perfect size palette. If you love pinks and purples, this is just beautiful. This is such a pretty Valentine's Day palette. I feel like this is just such an underrated palette, and they have some of my pretty, like my favorite shimmers in this palette. Like, oh my gosh, like Glamlite has some of my favorite shimmers ever. So number 7 goes to the Margarita palette. Even though margaritas are my favorite drink ever, I live for frozen margarita. They're my favorite. This one right here is basically the donut palette and the Paint Pro palette in one. I really like this palette. I haven't really gotten much use out of it, but I will because like spring is coming around the corner. So the number 6 spot goes to the Cake palette from Glamlite. You guys, this palette was so crazily hyped when it first came out. It was like sold out and everybody wanted it, and I love this one. This one used to be my favorite Glamlite palette until, you know, started collecting more and more started to come out, but this is just so pretty. I love everything about this. I've created some really gorgeous sunset looks with this palette. There's a lot of rainbow palettes from Glamlite and a lot of palettes that seem pretty similar that you can get similar looks with, like the Donut palette, the Paint Pro palette, the Margarita palette. I feel like you can get a lot of the same looks from those palettes, but this one is just my favorite. My number 5th palette from Glamlite is the Chocolate Martini palette. This is the palette I'm actually wearing on my eyes today. This is one of my favorite neutral palettes in my entire collection. One, because it is the Glamlite formula, which I love, but not only that, I just love the different tones of brown. It's just so beautiful. The look I created today is like really simple, but I was able to get like that really pretty gradient with it. I love that Glamlite's shimmers are really like glittery, intense, but you don't get a crap ton of fallout. You know, I just love that about Glamlite, and this palette is just Absolutely beautiful. If you love neutral palettes, I think you're really gonna love this one. If you haven't even tried out Glamlite's formulas, or if haven't tried out Glamlite at all, this is the video you stumbled upon trying to figure out which palette is the best one to get from Glamlite. As far as neutrals, this one is the best one. So my number 4 spot goes to the Dirty Martini palette. This one is probably the most different Glamlite palette throughout all of them that they've ever released, because it is an all green palette and they don't really have any other palettes that are like this one. So this one is truly unique to the Glamlite line. This is beautiful. I feel like if you love greens, if greens is one of your favorite colors, this is such a beautiful palette to have. I don't usually wear greens, but when I do, this is one of the palettes I pull from because I just love the different tones of green. I love like the bronzy, dirty colors in here, like the browns. Everything just works well together, and I really love this palette. It's such a beautiful palette from Glamlite. So we're getting into my top 3 palettes from Glamlite, and honestly, you guys, this was so hard for me, like truly hard for me, and it really sucks because it was so hard. Okay. So my number 3 palette goes to the Wine palette from Glamlite. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Why is this not your first one? And it's all purples, but it's so many different shades of purple. I don't think I've ever seen this many shades of purple in my entire life. This is one of my favorite purple palettes in my collection, you guys. And I have a lot of palettes. But this one right here is beautiful. I live for this palette, but it was so hard to choose between these 3 palettes that I'm about to show you guys. But this one, I was like, you know what, this one has to be number 3. It has to, because think about how much you use these palettes, what you can get out of these palettes, and things like that. So I love this one. This one gives me some of the most prettiest purple looks ever. The Glamlite Happy Hour collection is one of my favorite collections they have released thus far. I think it is my favorite collection they've released. But this one is number 3. But I'm gonna tell you guys what my number 2 palette is, which used to be my number 1 palette, but then I just fell in love with this other palette even more. My number 2 palette goes to the Ice Cream palette. Love this palette so much, you guys. You guys do not understand how much I love the Ice Cream palette from Glamlite. This is so beautiful. I freaking love this palette. I have gotten so many beautiful looks with this palette. It is not even funny. The only reason why this is no longer my number 1 palette is because of how often I use this. So I only use this palette in the spring and the summer. The other palette you guys are gonna see, I can use literally all year round, and that kind of like plays a part in it, you know? I think my favorite palette has to be a palette that I could use literally all the time, but I don't pull from this palette all the time. But this is just so beautiful, and when I tell you guys, these pastels show up on deeper complexions without looking ashy. They show up true to color. I'm gonna swatch these for you guys because they are literally insane. They're insane pastels. Look at that. If you are someone of a deeper complexion and you hate pastel palettes because they show up ashy and you're just like, I can't deal with pastels anymore, please try out this Glamlite Ice Cream palette because you will not be disappointed. I promise you. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed with this palette at all. The pastels in here are superior and I love them. Now let's get into my number 1 palette, which I'm pretty sure you guys are not even like surprised by. You guys probably already know what it is. It is the MIKAYLA X Glamlite palette. Now this is literally my favorite Glamlite palette. MIKAYLA did an amazing job with this because first of all, there's every tone of color in here that I could literally ever want. I have my row of neutrals on the top. I have my purples. I have my blues. I have my greens. I have my pinks. I have everything in this palette. This is a rainbow palette, but it is a more, like it's a different type of rainbow palette, and I love it. I use this palette literally all year round. My favorite shade in this palette is called Audrey, which is this one right here. I also love Stunnin' as well. There's some really pretty shimmers in here, like, gosh, I love this palette for the shimmers. I love this palette for the mattes too. Like this palette is just beautiful. This is why this is my favorite palette from Glamlite. If there's any palette you could pick up from Glamlite, I would highly 1000% recommend getting the Glamlite X MIKAYLA palette because it is just that good, okay? Just that good. But that is all of my Glamlite palettes, you guys. I have 16 palettes. There's some other palettes that are on my list that I want to get from Glamlite that I don't own, which I will be getting soon. Like their Hershey's collection. I really do want to pick that up. I tried to debate if I wanted to get one of the like icy palettes because I don't have a blue Glamlite palette, like an all blue palette from Glamlite, which I think would be really cool to have. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this ranking video. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you have any questions regarding any of these palettes, definitely leave them down below and I will respond. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.